How much can one person handle? Like, how much bad news, bad information, personal stuff can pile upon you before you're ready to go? We're going to talk also about your nervous system, how it feels like it's constantly revved up, ready to go. That is not healthy. Next is, are you being triggered by something in your past, habitually triggered by it, to anxiety or anger or depression? Or is this something that's really something you need to look at and face and deal with? Finally, in the fourth section, we're going to talk about being a hero of your own life and how do you do that. And if you would like a free coaching session, drop us a line and let us know. We'd love to have you.
Okay, so I have been stressed out lately because I have a few things up in the air with work, but then also my kids. Also, my wife and I are kind of in a different stage of our relationship. And then I have some personal stuff that I need to work out. It almost feels like walking on like a frozen lake. And you have to be careful like which step you take because some ground is more solid than others. And I have the experience of going over this lake before, and I have the experience of falling through it. But this time it's like I'm trying to do it a little bit more swiftly, not lose my shit. And I think I project this
Hmm.
calmness, especially in content that, I'm super
Hmm.
calm. I have everything figured out. But that's just because that's like my inside voice telling me to be calm as I'm going through something that's freaking me out. Have you ever been in a position where like it feels like all the walls are kind of closing in on you? How do you go through a period like that yourself?
I'm going through a period of, like that right now, and I suspect a lot of people are. We are living through just generally a time of great uncertainty. I mean, we could start to list all the things that are just really crazy right now. This is not normal. And then you apply that to your own life and the things that you're trying to do, and I think it's a really scary time. Okay, so I think let me first understand, why do you feel like this is a particularly fraught time when you've gone through things before, you understand what the issues are, and you probably know what to do about them. So what is it exactly that's making you feel uncertain? Why does it feel like you're walking over a frozen lake about to fall through if you don't go fast enough?
I think what's making it a bit more stressful this time is like what you said. There's other stuff outside of my control.
Hmm.
And so it's like I'm handling the immediate world and I feel relatively comfortable. It's stressful, it's tiring, I burn out, whatever that happens. But then there's like this next layer of things happening where I don't have control over. It feels like I'm not always able to process the information just fast enough. So my own personal growth, trying to raise my kids and not be stressed out so much about that, and I'm able to offer almost like this little sphere where they can just be kids and they don't have to worry about everything else that's happening. I'm trying to protect this little space. I'm trying to grow and expand it at the same time while all this other stuff is happening that I know I don't have control over. Um, and it's a little scary, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah. So, okay, so it's like there's two columns, right? You have the things that you have control over, which are like, how are you raising your kids? You have some control over how you're relating to your wife, right? And then you have all of these out of control things like the economy and AI and worrying about World War III and et cetera, et cetera. And so here's my challenge to you. What if you just let go? Why do you feel that you have to be the master juggler and figure all of these things out when I don't think that anybody, including AI, I mean, if you ran all this through AI and said, okay, what should I do? And I did this last night. I was like, how do I balance this, this, and this? And the answer is the same answer I give myself. You can't. You're not supposed to. So why do you feel that you're the one who has to keep it all together?
I guess in some sense that is what's maybe most difficult about this period is being able to let go. So I remember COVID was kind of the same. It felt similar. And Now it's a little bit different because I realize there's only so much I can do.
Hmm.
And I guess that letting go part is something that I'm trying to do this period. I think it might have something to do with my nervous system. It's like something in me just doesn't want to let it go. And
Hmm.
so even when I act, like I've let it go, like, oh, I'm chill, I'm whatever, I'm going with the flow. There's stuff I can't control. There's always something in the back of me that's just kind of creeping, like saying, like, well, pay attention to this, look at that, do something about this. And then that bleeds out into my personal life where I'm a bit more strict with the kids. I'm a bit more rigid at home. With work, I'm doing things that aren't really, I'm being more robotic and more mechanic because I feel like you do step one, step two, step three, and you'll be okay when that's not really the case. And even with, my family, it's not really the case. You can't just say this prescription solves everything and then that's it. And it's almost like I'm trying to do the most efficient thing kind of mechanically in order to save energy for to kind of spend on things that I can't control,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. And
Hmm.
so even when I stop, it's that mechanism is like still there. It's still like humming. It's like the engine might not be, you might not be pressing the gas, but the engine is still on.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good analogy. You grew up with, uh, you had a not the best childhood. Can we say that?
Yeah, I would agree.
And when you were growing up and you had, difficulties and traumatic things happen, um, how did you respond?
Trying to, I think, run away,
Hmm.
either running away or shutting down. I had like an instinct to try to. I remember there was this period of time where my dad got a job across the country, and we were losing. I didn't know at the time, but we were losing our house. And
Hmm.
so my mom and I had to stay at the house while my dad went to go get this new job across the country. At the same time, we lived in New Hampshire, and so in the winters it's really stormy, really, icy and stuff. And she had slipped and broke her back, and so my dad left, to because he had to, and then my mom broke her back. There's a couple of extra details that I won't put in there just out of respect for them, but that's probably what I can say. And so I remember there's this whole period of maybe like a year that was really intense where my mom was really difficult to deal with because
How
there
old were
wasn't
you?
a, I might have been 9.
Mm. And only
and
child.
and it was super chaotic. um it was super chaotic, and I remember just trying to be away as much as I could. And so I remember I'd try to spend about, if I wasn't in school, trying to spend about 80% of my time like just outside,
Hmm.
just trying to focus on something else, but also kind of waiting for that moment where something would kind of set her off, and she'd yell at me, and then it was clean something up, it was do something. And so it's like I was trying to run away, find this space where I could focus and just kind of be free.
Hmm.
And then but always like aware that, like, almost like there's this leash and I'm going to get called back and someone is going to be mad at me very soon. And it's like that same feeling now where it's
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm going to let it go, I'm going to try to just focus on what I can focus on. But then it's like, okay, well, what about AI, or what about the war, what about economy? And you got to snap back and be ready at any moment to deal with that.
So you're seeing the connection between your 9-year-old self and I don't know, are you running away from any problems right now? It sounds like you're not.
No, I'm not, and this is something that I've worked. So I've worked really hard on kind of taming the act or the reaction.
Hmm.
And this new phase of growth is now like getting that engine to turn off, not completely, maybe, because maybe in some sense I don't want that system, to be completely ignorant of what might be happening or what could happen. And
Hmm.
that's part of, naturally you want that system to work. But what I don't want is that system running 24 hours a day where I can't turn it off. So even though I'm not reacting anymore, and I can connect things much more, and then I can kind of consciously choose what I want to do, that engine is still humming. I have to be very serious about like meditating or working out or creating an environment in the home that doesn't trigger that. And so my wife has her own bag of stuff. And so we used to kind of just go back and forth and trigger those responses in each other like almost all the time.
Right.
And I think we ended up doing that to the kids to some extent.
Hmm.
And so now this new period has kind of just been, if we can just freeze everything and just create an environment where, like, well, you can't create a trigger free environment, but where we're aware of our stress responses so that when that stress response doesn't kick in, we don't add gas or like we don't add fuel to the fire. I don't know how long that's going to take because it feels like I've been working on this so long and now I'm just in this new phase of how to deal with it.
So you bring up so many interesting points. So first of all, the analogy that you're using of kind of being revved up, that is actually used a lot in describing what happens to kids when they are growing up in a traumatic environment. Your nervous system gets kicked off so much and so often that you have a new set level. So instead of being set, at 1 to 2 level of hypervigilance or vigilance about what could go wrong, you're permanently set at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and that makes it easy to get triggered. But think of it like a car that is, you can have a car that's idling, which is, kind of the ideal state that you want your body in. It's just calmly idling. It's waiting for things to happen. It's analyzing what's coming at you and then responding. Or you can have it revving up like vroom, vroom, vroom constantly. And that's what kids who grow up in traumatic situations, your body is constantly vrooming, kind of revved up. And that's really damaging to your body, physically, it's harmful. But it literally changes your brain architecture, is what they call it. That your brain will develop as a child with a more highly attuned fear center. So you become more easily triggered. And so now you're an adult, now you're, in your 20s, and you are recognizing that you're starting to get revved up, and you don't want to do that. And you don't want to do it to your kids. So you're trying to create an atmosphere where that's not going to happen. I think that we have gone on the other side. Like we spent, so many years not even recognizing that trauma had an effect on us. So now we've had, 30, 40, 50 years of trauma research that says, no, 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 it's a big deal. It really affects us. And it affects us so much because we're modern humans that don't get an opportunity to, run around and go, "Ah."
I would assume what you don't want is for that nervous system to be on all the time. You need your nervous system. You've already burnt it out
Yeah.
because it's been running the whole time.
I always want to do, I should do this maybe for social media, but when I see someone just behaving really badly in public, it is an example of somebody who is walking around with a highly revved up nervous system. Your classic Karen. I'm in Target and I saw something that I didn't like, and I'm going to tear down all the whole display. And that's an example of somebody who has not been able to manage their nervous system, and so little things trigger them. So a good way to help yourself be prepared for bad things is to understand where your nervous system goes to. I tend to go to fight, or I tend to go to flight, or whatever it is. Recognizing that your body is dysregulated. My heart's pounding. I feel sick to my stomach. I'm feeling kind of dizzy. I'm shaky. My mouth's dry. Noticing that's my anxiety. That's my anxiety attack coming up. Or you get a full-on panic attack. I recognize I'm in a full-on panic attack. The panic attack is just my body going haywire, and I need to get it back under control. And the way you do that is you're breathing, you talk to yourself, you move your body, you shake things out, all of those things that we talk about. And, we have to stay calm and sit in front of our screens and be, gentle with everything. And that's not realistic either. So what I think you're calling out for is, where's the middle ground where you can recognize that you are triggered by things, that your nervous system is responding, that you're getting anxiety or fearful over it, see that it could be affecting your children and wanting to find a space where that's not going to happen, where you're going to raise kids and you're going to be in a household where things are beautiful and calm and all of that. And I would say that probably what we all need to do is figure out how to be, the prehistoric humans that we are that have all of this fight or flight and recognizing, okay, I'm in fight or flight. My kids are triggered. The whole household's in disarray. I'm internally in disarray because I'm anxious about, conceptual things like money and technology and am I keeping up and all of those things. And then say, how do I now manage that? How do I teach myself and my kids the best way to handle that? And I think that was your original question to me. The only thing that I have been able to make work for me, and it's a constant thing, is I have to control my thoughts. And what I mean by controlling my thoughts is I have to, I mean, aside from, doing meditation, getting out and moving my body so I'm not all tensed and everything, stretching, doing all these things, then I have to stop myself from going into negative spaces. And that's very hard. One, because it feels safe to always look at the negative. Were you the kind of kid that if my mom didn't come home, when I was little, I immediately thought she was in a car accident and she's dead. And I did that in order to prepare myself. And I constantly do that even to this day. What is the worst of the worst of the worst that I can imagine? And it's a defense mechanism. And it's hard not to dwell in that because then you want to say, okay, I'm prepared. I've got, it's like being an emotional prepper all the time. Do I have, some money in the bank and is there food on the shelves? And then what if, this breaks down? And we've talked about this. Both of us are kind of, amateur preppers. We have to figure out that middle ground. And if we can help ourselves to figure out that middle ground, maybe we can help other people to figure out that middle ground. So what is in between your fear response, which you've trained your body to do because it has saved you, right? To be highly triggered to like what shit's going to go wrong. And then, but desiring to have a peaceful, calm life. So where can you find middle ground? What would that look like for you?
I think I'm trying to find like how to differentiate between a trigger that is originating in your past or some negative reaction that you've had that's built up over time. How do I know my anxiety or stress response isn't being hijacked by past me?
Hmm.
And then sometimes I guess sometimes my first response used to be to run. So I'd usually just run to go distract myself.
Hmm.
And now I'm finding that it's more of like a freeze response
Hmm.
where like I might slow things down. And so I might ask, okay, like what needs to get done today? Because I know I'm going to be operating a lot slower because I'm going to have this processing thing going in the back of my head.
I think the first thing is just recognize that you're feeling fear. You just go back to that. You just keep going back to that. I am feeling afraid. And then it loses some of that kind of magical feeling about it that it's like, it's like a creeping ghost behind you all the time, Oh, I don't know why. I feel really anxious. I feel uncomfortable. I feel like I don't know what's going to happen. And oh God, I got to do this and I should make a list to do that. And oh, what if this happens, right? And that's just classic low level, constant anxiety that so many of us live in, and what I feel like works the best is to just go back to the basics. And this is part of our resilience blueprint is first of all, the things that happen to you, the way you are not your fault. And we we have to recognize that somewhere deep inside, the anxiety comes from a feeling that things happen to me and I must have had some kind of role in it. If I was abused, did I make myself a target? If I was neglected, maybe I wasn't really a lovable kid, you know. If I lived in a home where, you know, everyone's yelling and screaming, it's like, what did I do to deserve this family? How come I didn't get, you know, the Brady Bunch family, right? And if you can unhook yourself from the feeling of fault, like it was my fault, what gets hooked onto fault is responsibility. So kids who grew up in traumatized or adverse childhood experiences kind of homes, chaotic environments, take on tend to take on over to be over responsible, feel that they're responsible for everything. There's this kind of sense like we grow up in this almost this box that hems us in from the time we are born and even in the womb, as research shows. And then you grow up in this world where you're hemmed in and you can't be yourself and you don't know what's going on half the time. I mean, I think of my childhood as looking up like a bird going, what the hell is going on? Like, what is happening here? Like, where am I? Why is this happening? And so start there and then recognize that you are going to have these responses that you can't control either, that your nervous system response, the way that you chose as a child or didn't even choose, you didn't choose as a child to get anxious, to run away, to fight when it, you know, something came up and you just screamed and had a tantrum or whatever it was that was your way of handling it. You didn't control that either. So now you're at a place where you want to now be the puppet master of your life and you're creating anxiety because you can't. So this is why I come back to what is it that you do control? And I'm asking you that. What is not a rhetorical question. What do you have actual control over? You don't control your wife, you don't control your kids, you don't control the economy, you don't control technology, you don't control your work, you don't control other people, you don't control um, the fabric of reality is not under your control. So what do you have any control over?
After you told me about that book you read by Robert Sapolsky, I've been thinking about that a lot and not much. I think maybe my thoughts or my consciousness to like some small degree.
Hmm.
And I think that's about it.
So for people watching, Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist who's written many books about our nervous system, our brain, and how it perceives the world, we react to things. And he's studied primates a lot, so understanding the difference between humans and primates. And his I think his final book is called Determined, and it says that basically the who we are is not under our control. I mean, that's kind of the best way to put it, that we don't have free will. And so that's a very intense and difficult way to look at humanity and what we're living through. But it is number one, really well researched. I think I have it somewhere. But number two, it is an interesting way of making sense of the world, and in it there is ironically a lot of freedom. Because once you give up this sense of, I have to control everything, I have to understand my childhood, I have to control my nervous system, I have to make sure that I'm, you know, having a successful life. All of these things become heavy weights on us. And, you know, are we really making that much of a difference? And the fact of the matter is, some people do have better lives than others. And you can track it back to, well, they had wealth when they were growing up. They had the perfect parents. They had a lot of opportunity. They were born, you know, in Northern California. They weren't born in South Sudan or Gaza. So we come down to this question of what is it that you actually have control over?
You have control over your thoughts to some extent. And I think maybe where you get the most control is when you take the limited amount of control that you have And I don't mean control in the sense of like you're trying to control, but more like autonomy.
Hmm.
You do what you can with whatever you have at the moment. And if you're consistent enough with that, then it compounds over time. And so you kind of grow this little bit of autonomy that you have into much more. And not in a way that you get the outcome that you want 100% of the time, but almost in a way of leveraging the amount of time or energy or consciousness or money that you have consistently over time so that you increase the probability that you get closer to the things that you want, but with no guarantee that you'll actually get them.
Hmm. So you said something about you can control your thoughts to some extent. So how do you control your thoughts? What direction do you put your thoughts in?
Well, not to get super mystical, but like if you focus on something negative and that's all you're thinking, then that's what's going to consume you.
Hmm.
It's I guess the law of attraction is what you would call it in spirituality, where you start thinking about. I guess that's kind of goes hand in hand with manifestation too. But you start thinking about something negative, and or the example that you gave me last week of, you're about to buy a new car, and so once you find the model that you want, all of a sudden you just start seeing it everywhere. And
Right.
it's the same thing with negative thoughts. And
Hmm.
so and for me, I've had to kind of learn how to, when I notice myself spiraling or thinking those negative things, then in a very, very simple way, not trying to solve everything, but just trying to figure out something to kind of contrast that negative image,
Yeah.
and then just almost just like hammering away at it until like you try to just plant a small seed and water it as much as you can. And over time, I think the seed kind of roots itself and it becomes a tree, and it's a lot harder to kind of go into those negative thoughts, which I think is kind of where I'm at right now. But it's not, but like you still have to. I don't know. I'm kind of creating this. I have this vision of like a garden of all this positivity and great things, but you still get weeds, and you still
Sure.
get pests, and you still
Hmm.
get rodents,
Hmm.
and you still have to take care of them. Um, and I think for me, sometimes it can be easy, even though there's all this positive stuff. I go take that weed, and now I'm looking for weeds, and all of a sudden, now it's almost like now I'm planting weeds.
That's a really great analogy. So think of your brain like a garden. So you can imagine this garden where the garden's just not great. You don't see, it's the vegetables aren't, growing to the sky and the flowers aren't blooming and the trees are looking sad. But you notice one little bud that's like, peeking out from, the soil, and you notice that and you say, look at this cute little bud. This is so beautiful. This is a great thing. It's going to be something wonderful. And then, yeah, and then you have to continually weed that garden because the weed will come up and say, oh, it's so small, that little bud, it's just one, and the rest of the garden is, trash, and everything sucks. And that is the process that I wanted to kind of illustrate, that it's very hard. I have to do this constantly, day in and day out, not where I'm not noticing the weeds. I'm noticing that the sky is gray. I'm noticing that there are, pests in the garden. But so I'm not being like, I don't see anything bad. Everything's wonderful. That's not realistic. I think you have to notice the pests in the garden and the weeds coming up and the, sky is not looking right. And then you have to adjust. How are you going to tend that garden? You want the good stuff to grow. So you're going to pull out the weeds, which will be the thoughts that, this is never going to work. What if my wife and I get into an argument and then we break up? What if that time that I yelled at the kids is the thing that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives and it's going to mess them up? And those are all weeds. So you can say, I see that that's a weed. How can I pull that out? Right. So for my kids, they saw us having a horrible fight. Me and my wife had this horrible fight and they witnessed it. and it's going to mess them up. Now you say, okay, I got to deal with that weed. So you might say, well, let's, me and the wife are going to sit down and we're going to talk to kids about, sometimes people get angry and they say terrible things and they do terrible things to each other. And you're going to have those experiences too. Here's how you deal with it. You could still love someone and get into a really terrible fight. Sometimes you need to get all that stuff out. And what we are trying to do is figure out ways to get all the ugly feelings out and so that we can put them out to the sunlight and then we can resolve them. And I want you and your brother or your sister to be able to do those same things. So you can get into arguments with each other, but here are some ways in which to do it, and mom and I are going to show you how to do that. So, it's a problem solving, it's a way to teach them. But just because you have a home that sometimes is not the best place to be, I'm sorry, that's reality. That is reality. And I think we have done a really, kind of a disservice in a lot of ways to portray. There's so much media out there about these, perfect families, and these, reality shows about everybody loves everybody and look at how wonderful it is. And, like I, said, the Brady Bunch, because, we have conflict. And instead of being okay with conflict and finding ways to be in conflict with each other that are healthy and resolve problems, I think we have created these expectations of perfection that we can't meet. Here's something that we have to talk about with trauma is that pretty much everybody experiences something that's traumatic in their life. And it can be caused by their parents being terrible parents, not knowing how to do it. It can be caused by their circumstances. It can be caused by the world, around us. It can be, it can be caused by genetic factors. It can be caused by, there's just so many things. And I think we have to normalize that that's how life is. We do not grow until we have stress. No kid would be walking if they weren't stressed out that they need to get up and go get a cookie or go get their toy and start crawling and reach for things. And we wouldn't talk if we didn't have the stress of wanting to communicate, this is what I need and want. Well, let's get back to the fact that you're afraid. You're afraid that you're going to do something wrong, get something wrong, mess something up. And that comes back to that whole traumatized kid who felt so much responsibility to be there for his mom who broke her back and to still preserve himself by being like running away and going out into nature and trying to close the world in around himself so that he could have an opportunity to develop and become a person. You did it. You were able to do that and you succeeded in that. And you're able to come around full circle and have a pretty decent relationship with your parents now and, strive to be a good father. Why can't you let it go and be okay with all of that?
I I I can let it go, but I feel like kind of coming back to the conversation. And so even in this conversation, hearing it from your perspective and your angle is, I think it's reinforcing what I think maybe the right path to continue down is. Because sometimes I think when you're walking down that path alone, or no one can exactly relate, I think my kids will be fine. I'm not saying we're going to do it perfect, but I think we're going to get it just a little better. For myself, I feel the same way. I think as stressed and as anxious as I get, I also have this side of me that's like, that is realistic. I think I want to diligently focus on anything that I can make better,
Mm-hmm.
but the hammer is going to drop. And I don't think it's like I am triggered, or I think because of my past the hammer is going to drop, or the shoes,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that saying is. But like it actually will.
Mm-hmm.
At some point between now and the time I die, there's probably a few hammers are probably going to drop.
Yeah, bad
Uh,
things will happen and good things will happen. Yep.
And you saying that, it gives me some comfort because it's like I'm always waiting for it to happen. I'm
Hmm.
always scared that it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when it happens. How do you continue to function at a decent level, but just knowing like something's going to happen?
Hmm.
What is there anything? Is there anything to do about it?
I just think that we have to just be okay with the fact that we're not going to always be prepared for the worst thing that's going to happen. I think a lot of the preparation is about just reducing today's anxiety. I think the bottom line is we can't control things. We can't control everything. And I think if you're trying to get yourself into a spot where you feel like I've got the whole control panel laid out here, and I'm going to push this button for family, this button for wife, this button for work, this button for finances, this button for friendships. It's just not going to happen. And are you okay with that? Is the question, I think.
It's almost like a two-sided answer. Yes, I'm okay. And at the same time, I'm going to be trying to do, I don't want to say control, but everything I can to try to make it better if it can be better
Yeah.
with almost no expect. And I think maybe this is the part that took, that is something, it's like a hard pill to swallow, just doing it without the expectation. And so, like, what do I do? And I feel better internally when I'm doing something,
Hmm.
whether no matter what outcome it gets, I feel better when
Sure.
I'm doing something.
Yeah. If you want internal peace, you have to give it to yourself inside and not expect it from the outside. Not just who is Tyler right now in May of 2025, but where is Tyler in this long journey that you're on that is really a heroic journey where you're discovering what are your powers and you're giving those powers to the world, even if they're not perfect right now, even if you're, falling from the building and crashing around and messing up the whole town because you don't quite know how to use your superpowers yet. You're on the right track and give yourself credit for that, you know?
What so seeing myself as the best version of myself, father, husband, entrepreneur, saving the world and seeing myself as the hero. On one hand, like it feels nice to picture that. And I think a lot of the times when I'm going through difficult things, I try to picture myself as that. On the other hand, it almost feels um like almost like, oh no, like I don't want my ego to be involved in this. I don't want to
Mhm.
like be feeding my ego with everything I'm doing.
Mhm.
Is there like a balance to
Yeah.
strike with that?
Yeah. Everybody is a hero in their own lives. You have to be. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're living an unaware life. The only thing about being a hero is that you're putting yourself in the context of a long journey. You're seeing yourself in the context of a growth pattern. And the reason you're a hero is because all of us are. I have to stand out in my own life, or else what am I doing here? Don't hide your light under a bushel. All it means is that you were whatever made you put you here on in this reality zone, this dimension, and did this for everybody, gave you something, gave you life that has some purpose and meaning in it that you create or you co-create maybe, or maybe just gets, like Robert Sapolsky says, you're just like, oh boy, you just kind of put together a bunch of stuff and then it made a Tyler. Um, but if you don't see yourself that way and you don't see other people that way, I think this is even more important, then you're not allowing people and you're not allowing yourself to fail, to be on a journey, in a process, learning and growing constantly. To see yourself as a hero is not to see yourself as the hero um, who has arrived, right? You're not the hero standing on top of the building with your cape flying, saying, I have conquered all. You are the hero who is on a process. And this is why, when I do tarot readings, that's what the tarot cards are all about, is that you start out as a fool who doesn't know where you're going and what you're doing, and you go off on your journey. And that's the hero's journey, is to recognize that you're on a process. And you're going to get there at some point, but right now you're doing the best you can to help yourself and other people. That's a hero. You're finding your purpose and you're trying to live your purpose. I think I'm going to do like I just had this image of like, you know, uh, a magazine cover, and it's like hero, and then it's got your face, and then it's like, what's Tyler doing today? Tyler learns about, how Tyler manages his anxiety. Tyler's favorite recipe for brownies. You can just like, that's the kind of hero. It's just like, imagine yourself on the face of a magazine cover, learning, and where are you at in your stage of life? We're all on some kind of stage of life like that. That's the hero's journey. You're a hero because you're falling into pits and you're trying to figure things out, and the birds are pecking at your head, and um you're walking through the fire, and then you're going to meet a cranky old man who's going to give you lies and give you riddles that you have to solve. That's the hero's journey. And then you make the journey all the way and you figure it all out, and oh, I think I figured it out, and then you come back and you're right where you started. You're back to being the fool. That's a hero's journey. That's the actual hero's journey.
So I'm trying to find maybe holes in this, and maybe from my perspective and maybe the audience's perspective of like, okay, like where are the holes in this? Like, and I think that's kind of like the anxious mind again, kind of like trying to say, but that won't work for me, or whatever. But
Hmm.
sometimes when I get to the end of a coaching session, like you can see someone have a breakthrough. And so like even in this conversation, I feel like, okay, great. Breath of fresh air. Whew, almost like a reset.
Hmm.
And then like starting like that, starting at the fool again, almost like, okay,
Hmm.
we went through this whole journey, we went through this whole conversation, and
Yeah.
now I'm like right back at the beginning. Okay, but what about what
Yeah.
about my anxiety?
Yeah. Well, what about your anxiety? Go figure out what you can do to relax yourself today and let some stuff go. You're not going to control it all. It's okay. Do what you can. If going and working for an hour on, setting out some new emails or something, or calling a client or whatever makes you feel better, then do it. But don't imagine that you're going to ever get on top of that by chasing after the anxiety. The way that you're going to deal with the baseline anxiety is to come back to that garden and recognize that you're in a nice house, you've got your family around you, you've got some kind of money in the bank, you've got your health, and you just start recognizing all the good things that you actually already have and enjoy them. And give yourself 10 minutes every hour if you have to wallow in anxiety and try to figure out what you're going to do about those things. And then spend the rest of the 40, 50 minutes of your hour um, enjoying what you have. Okay, so wrap it up by explaining how you see things now. Where you started and where you are now, and wh- where you all the steps.
Maybe the biggest thing is just looking at it, just look at the day. I think it might have been one of the more simpler things that you said, but maybe one of the most powerful for me is like start where you are, but don't like almost like don't pull the wool over your eyes thinking like it's going to make everything better. Do it because it's what you should do. It might make you feel better tomorrow, but also almost kind of like breaking this barrier of, well, something's going to happen tomorrow too,
Mm-hmm.
and something's going to happen next week and next month and next year, and like it's going to keep happening. And that's it. Like for me, like that thought can go on. Okay, well, and then I start thinking, okay, well, what are the solutions? But this conversation kind of encapsulated like that's it. Like that's the thing.
What's great about seeing everybody is on a hero's journey is that heroes fail. They don't learn lessons a lot. They struggle. They go through the same thing over and over and over again. They keep hitting, one obstacle after another. We're all doing that. So the purpose of a hero and being on the journey is that they are constantly challenged. And every challenge is an opportunity to grow and to move on to the next challenge. And it's a journey. And again, at the end of the journey, you get to start again on a new journey. That's what a hero does. That is the mythical hero. That's what they're all about. And what makes them special, what makes your journey special and my journey special and everybody else's, is that it's unique to us. And it the things the obstacles we're going to face are exactly the ones that we need to in order to grow ourselves and become stronger and become more of who we're supposed to be, who we are. Every hero gets honed, with their circumstances that get presented to them. So you're meeting what you're supposed to meet in order to overcome them so you can go on to the next thing. And the next thing is just going to be more interesting and you're going to handle it better because you've been able to handle the things that have come in the past. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll subscribe for weekly podcasts about building personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. You can also find free tools, resources, and quizzes at bbgtv.org. That's bbgtv.org.